There was a small town surrounded by green fields and quiet streets. In the middle of this town stood an old school. During the day, the school looked very normal. Children came in the morning, holding their books and laughing with their friends. Teachers stood at the doors of classrooms, calling the students inside. The playground was full of noise, shouts, and the sound of running feet. The bell rang at the right time every morning, afternoon, and evening. Everything seemed safe, normal, and happy. But when the sun went down, the school became very different. After evening, when all the children and teachers left, silence slowly filled the empty building. The classrooms that were full of noise in the day now looked like dark boxes. The long corridors became cold and empty. The playground that once had children playing now stood under the shadow of the moon, quiet and still. From outside, the school building looked harmless, but the people in the town always said the place had a strange feeling at night. Some people believed it was haunted. They said that after midnight, sounds could be heard inside, even though the school was locked. Some claimed they had heard whispers, footsteps, and sometimes even the ringing of the bell. The townspeople often warned one another, never go near the school at night. Children were told not to play around the building after dark. Most people avoided walking past it once the sun had gone down. Still, the school stood there every night, tall and silent, holding secrets inside its walls. Nobody knew why strange things happened there. Nobody knew who or what was behind the noises. And nobody dared to find out. This was the place where Theo, the school's watchman, had to spend every single night. Theo was the night watchman of the school. He was a middle-aged man, quiet in nature, with tired eyes, but a strong sense of responsibility. Every evening, when the teachers and children left, Theo would arrive with his lantern in one hand and a small bag of food in the other. His duty was simple: to guard the school at night. First, he checked all the classrooms, making sure every window was closed and every door was locked. He walked through the corridors slowly, listening to the echo of his own footsteps. Then he locked the main gate and sat on a wooden chair near the office. Theo always told himself it is just a building. Nothing to fear. He tried to believe his job was easy. Most nights, he sat quietly, drinking his tea from a steel cup. Sometimes, he read an old newspaper by the dim light of his lantern. The school at night was silent, and Theo became used to the stillness. But even though he tried to act brave, deep inside Theo often felt uneasy. The long empty corridors, the dark classrooms, and the sound of the wind passing through broken windows made him uncomfortable. Sometimes, he thought he heard faint whispers, but he told himself it was only his imagination. People in the town often asked him, "Theo, how do you spend the whole night in that haunted school?" He always laughed softly and said, "There is nothing here but walls and dust. Ghosts don't live in schools." But in his heart, Theo was not fully sure. Every night, he followed the same routine. He locked the gates, checked the classrooms, and sat alone under the dim light. He thought his job was simple. But he did not know that very soon, something inside the school would test his courage. One night, Theo was sitting on his wooden chair near the office. The lantern burned softly beside him, and he was sipping hot tea from his steel cup. Everything was calm. The corridors were silent, the classrooms locked, and the whole building seemed to be asleep. Suddenly, a loud sound broke the silence. The school bell rang. The sharp ringing echoed through the dark hallways and spread across the empty playground. Theo almost dropped his cup in shock. His heart began to pound in his chest. For a moment, he froze, unable to move. He whispered to himself, How can this be? Everyone has gone home. The bell cannot ring by itself." Gathering courage, Theo picked up his lantern and walked quickly toward the bell tower. The sound had already stopped by the time he reached the courtyard. He stood under the bell, staring at the thick rope that hung still. It was not moving. The wind was not blowing. Everything was quiet again. Theo touched the rope carefully, expecting it to swing, but it was heavy and still. He looked around the courtyard, shining his lantern into the corners, but there was no one. The schoolyard was empty. Confused, he muttered, maybe I imagined it, maybe the wind made the sound. But deep inside, he knew what he heard was real. Shaken, Theo went back to his chair and tried to calm himself. He forced himself to drink the rest of his tea, but his hands were trembling. For the rest of the night, he did not hear the bell again. When morning came, Theo felt tired and uneasy. He tried to convince himself it was only a mistake, only a trick of his mind. But something inside him whispered that this was just the beginning of something much darker. The next night, Theo returned to the school with heavy thoughts. The strange ringing of the bell from the night before had not left his mind. He told himself again and again, it was nothing, maybe I was tired, maybe I only imagined it. But his heart did not believe his own words. As usual, Theo checked the classrooms one by one. He locked the windows, shut the doors, and walked down the long empty corridors. But this time, the silence felt heavier. Every sound, the creak of the wooden floor, the whisper of the wind, made him more nervous than before. After finishing his round, he sat on his wooden chair near the office, his lantern burning beside him. He tried to read a newspaper to distract his mind, but the letters seemed to dance on the page. His ears kept waiting, listening, fearing the sound of the bell. And then, suddenly, it happened. The bell rang again. This time, the sound was louder than before. It echoed through the entire building, bouncing from wall to wall, making the night air shake. Theo jumped to his feet, his lantern shaking in his hand. His heart beat so fast that he thought it might burst. No, this cannot be happening again, he whispered, his voice trembling. He ran toward the courtyard, his footsteps loud on the stone floor. The ringing continued, filling the school with a strange, haunting rhythm. But when Theo reached the bell tower, the sound stopped suddenly. The rope hung still, just as it had the night before. There was no sign of anyone. Theo stood there, sweating, his hands cold. Fear wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. He felt sure now, this was no mistake, no imagination. Something was inside the school. Something that wanted him to hear the bell. That night, Theo did not sleep at all. He sat awake until sunrise, his eyes wide, his mind full of fear. Theo could no longer ignore what was happening. 2 nights in a row, the school bell had rung without anyone touching it. His fear was strong, but so was his curiosity. He told himself, I must find out the truth. I cannot just sit and wait in fear every night. On the 3rd night, he came prepared. Along with his lantern, he carried a stick for courage. After locking the main gate and checking the classrooms as usual, he stayed alert, waiting for the sound. His eyes kept moving to the bell tower and his ears stayed sharp, listening for the first ring. Hours passed. The silence of the school felt deeper than ever. Finally, close to midnight, it happened again. The bell rang. Theo's heart jumped, but this time, instead of running blindly, he held his lantern high and began to walk carefully through the corridors. The sound of the bell echoed louder, pulling him toward the tower. His footsteps echoed too, as if someone was walking behind him. He turned quickly, but no one was there. He continued forward, his hands shaking, the flame of the lantern flickering. As he passed the classrooms, he felt cold air brushing against his neck, even though all the windows were closed. Shadows seemed to move along the walls, as if they were alive. Theo whispered, "Who's there? Show yourself." But only silence answered. Finally, he reached the courtyard. The bell was still ringing, the rope moving up and down on its own. His eyes widened. He slowly stepped closer, raising his lantern toward the tower. Suddenly, the rope stopped moving. The bell fell silent, leaving only an echo in the night. Theo stood frozen, his stick tight in his hand. He realized he was not fighting the wind, nor his imagination. Something unseen was there, something playing with him. Fear tightened in his chest, but Theo also knew this was only the beginning. Theo's fear grew each night, but so did his determination. He told himself, I must see with my own eyes what is making that bell ring. On the 4th night, He decided to stay close to the courtyard, keeping his lantern bright and his eyes fixed on the bell tower. Midnight came, and as expected, the sound began. The bell rang again, loud, sharp, and chilling. This time, Theo did not run in panic. He tightened his grip on his lantern and slowly stepped forward. His heart beat like a drum, but his legs carried him toward the tower. When he reached the courtyard, he lifted the lantern high. And then his eyes widened in shock. He saw a figure. It was the shape of a young student, standing near the bell rope. The child looked pale, almost transparent, with dark hollow eyes. The boy's small hands were pulling the rope again and again, making the bell swing. Theo gasped. His voice shook as he whispered, Who are you? The ghostly figure did not answer. The bell kept ringing, echoing across the empty school. Theo stepped closer, his lantern shaking. But as soon as he came within a few steps, the child turned his head. The hollow eyes stared directly into Theo's. A cold wave ran through Theo's entire body. And then, just like smoke, the figure disappeared. The rope dropped still, and the bell went silent. Theo stood frozen, his breath heavy, his face pale. He realized the truth. The bell was haunted, not by machines or tricks, but by the restless spirit of a child. He staggered back, whispering to himself, This place is not meant for the living. For the first time, Theo truly understood the danger of staying in the school at night. Theo could not sleep after what he had seen. The image of the ghostly child pulling the rope stayed in his mind like a nightmare that refused to end. His hands still trembled when he remembered those hollow eyes staring at him. When the morning came, Theo did not wait. He packed his lantern and left the schoolyard quickly. His legs felt weak, but his decision was strong. He walked straight to the headmaster's office and said, I cannot do this job anymore. Something lives in that school at night, and I will not return. The headmaster looked at him with surprise, but Theo's pale face and shaking voice proved he was serious. Without another word, Theo resigned. News spread quickly through the small town. People whispered in the market. Theo left the school. He saw something terrible there. Parents pulled their children closer, warning them never to go near the building after sunset. The legend of the haunted bell grew stronger, and fear spread even more. Since that day, no one agreed to work as the night watchman. The school gates were locked in the evening, and after dark, the building stood alone, silent yet not empty. Many nights, people living near the school reported hearing the sound of the bell ringing again and again. Some claimed they saw a small shadow moving near the tower, a child-shaped figure disappearing into the dark. Theo never returned to that place. He avoided even walking near the school. But the memory of the ringing bell never left him. And so, the haunted bell became part of the town story. Parents told their children, stay away from the school after dark. If you hear the bell, don't look back. Because everyone knew, the bell still rang at night, even when no one was there to pull the rope. This was the story of the haunted school where the bell rings on its own at night. Do you believe such places exist? Or was it only Theo's imagination? If you enjoyed this scary story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more horror stories every day. Your support helps us bring more chilling tales to life. Stay safe, and remember, if you ever hear a bell ringing at night, make sure no one is pulling the rope.